Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Marianne and Lynn here, and I am coming in from Transforming Hearts PLLC. And my guest speaker, Lynn Reilly, LPC, is here today. We have a great segment. Today, we continue on May Mental Health Awareness Month. And again, these are focusing on things that are outside of talk therapy. So that way, you know that there are things that are outside where you can definitely heal and grow in different ways. And sometimes we don't know the resources to be able to figure out what can I do in order to get myself to heal or focus on something that will be beneficial to me. So this month I have been focusing on bringing in different, people who have different businesses and do these wonderful things. So how you doing today, Lynn?
I'm doing well. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. So I'm going to introduce the audience to some of the things that you do.
Fabulous.
All right. So, as a holistic professional counselor, Lynn Reilly thrives on helping others access joy where emptiness lives. Nothing inspires her more than collecting stories of hope, faith, and serendipity to remind us we are not alone in this wild ride of life. Lynn hosts a community blog on Substack called Stories of Serendipity. This weekly free newsletter is placed to read, share, and marvel at stories of serendipity, experiences of timely interventions, inspiration, and inexplicable events that suggest we are not alone in our times of need. That perhaps in some way we are supported all along. So you can subscribe for weekly doses of hope at lynnreilly.substack.com or share your own story of serendipity. And she has a website, livingwithserendipity.com/submit story of serendipity. And I'll definitely put that in the comments so that everybody can have and they can look you up. So tell us about how you ended up coming into this part of things, because you're a LPC, you're a master energy therapist. So tell me a little bit more about your journey.
Well, my journey has really been working at helping people connect with their fears to return to their faith. So, as opposed to pushing through, let's get through this, just shaming ourselves for all the things that we're not doing, it's really connecting for me, it's connecting with that resistance
Mm,
and connecting with that resistant emotion that we may not want to feel or experience and the fears that might be driving them. And when we do that, when we create that invitation to let that unexpressed emotion or impulse come up and we release it, the
mhm,
energy piece of it, then we're connecting back to our intuitive, loving, guiding voice. So that's what I like to do in my practice, or that is what I do in my practice. And I'm
mhm,
also always looking for creative ways to do that in a different way for people. And one of the ways that I do that is through storytelling. So
mhm,
my own storytelling, where I like to share stories of my own tales of intense fear and all the thoughts that are going through me and how I worked with them and then
mhm,
how that helped me connect back to that voice of intuition, that voice of faith. And
mhm,
Stories of Serendipity is just another way to do that. So I love to write stories, but I get tired of hearing my own stories and I want to
mhm,
share other people's stories, which is where Stories of Serendipity came from, inviting other people's voices in to the table and saying, "Hey, I feel fear too. It's
mhm,
terrifying. I'm looking for evidence that things are going to work out because who isn't?"
mhm.
And then it came. And here was this miraculous thing that happened that felt miraculous to me, and sharing that voice of faith in a different way.
Mm. Do you find that's really helpful to the audience and the other maybe readers that are seeing this, and it helps encourage them to get more involved as well and share their stories?
I do. I think that there is always resistance in sharing our stories because that fear of being exposed or seen, we very
Mm,
much live in a culture that's like, damn fear, like that, yell at your inner critic, like, okay, you're just yelling at yourself, right? As opposed to, tell me more. Tell me more what's happening inside you instead of pushing it away.
mhm.
What are the stories that all of these emotions of ours have to say? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes there's resistance for people sharing their stories because it's like, well, if people see that I have these insecurities and their fears, they're going to look down on me, or they're going to, judge me, and then I'll feel rejected before it even happens, kind of a thing. And that's the resistance that blocks people from telling their stories. I've got similar ones myself, of course. But the more that we work with those fears and we share these other aspect of like, well, I let this fear speak, and it connected me to this experience that really highlighted my faith, that I could listen to my inner voice. And I have proof, because serendipity are these like little bits of evidence of like, see, you showed up for yourself and now you're being shown up for. So we're looking for that outside support. And when you actually write it down, which is why I like writing about them, you get to not only process that fear or that emotion that you're resisting and sort of let it move through you again, but you get to connect to that voice of faith and then express it. And then it's almost like reminding yourself of that proof and that evidence. So there's benefits to reading it because you get to see yourself through somebody else kind of safely. And there's benefits to
Right.
writing it because you get to re-experience it and then share it. And it feels really good to share those things.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit of Wi-Fi issues. Hold on. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, okay. All right. I think there was a little bit of connectivity issues. Always on technology, right? Okay. So, let's see. Yeah, I think it's a little bit delayed. But so I love that is something that is occurring like in that aspect, and I'm glad that you created that environment to do so. And I also think it's always helpful when there is kind of a licensed professional. Not to say, I don't know, do you guide these things, or it's something that you invite them to do and they kind of open up and it's just like, okay, whatever happens, right?
Yep. It's sort of trusting the flow in a sense, right? So I
Mhm.
have I supported their process? Yes. But not changing the
Mm.
process. It's more about maybe more asking questions of, do you want to go a little bit further in this direction? Because again, there's that resistance. You're sharing your story.
Mhm.
It's like, ooh, that's exposure, right? And so
Right.
giving a little bit more nurturing to that resistance, I think helps sometimes.
Yeah, that's not, and I can't imagine how empowering that must feel to someone kind of sharing that story in such a way, and you inviting them in and creating like this atmosphere of courage and just support. And so whenever people feel that, I'm sure they feel a sense of empowerment of just being able to share their story, talk it out, and talk it out themselves, and
Yes.
sharing their narrative and saying, "Ooh, I did that." And it's such a scary situation because I put myself in a vulnerable position, but it felt empowering.
Yes.
Oh, that's
And that
awesome.
juicy high that comes with it.
Yeah, yeah. So these are weekly, right?
They are. I've been slowed down a little bit because of my own regular life stuff. So this is a project of joy for me for sure. So, I kind of was off and running and then had to pull back just a little bit for my own experiences with my kids, end of the school year kind of stuff. But yes, they are meant to be weekly.
Yeah, it gets so tough in trying to do something like, especially when you have kids, and it's like, okay, well, how can how can I manage this and balance it out and make it work? Because it can get tough.
It does. I have to work with
Right.
my own resistance and my own fear of like, okay, why are you doing this again?
Right. Right. But I think that's, and I think that's great, right? Because I was just talking to somebody beforehand, and we were talking about like what is the purpose to some of the things that you do, right? Sometimes we want to do so many different things, but finding that purpose is what kind of what, because if we lose track of that, then a lot of times we lose sight of what we initially started. It's so
Right.
easy to get off course that way.
Well, I think
All right.
sometimes when we get
So
inspiration, I don't know if you can hear, I don't know if we got a delay still.
go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say sometimes we get that inspiration that hits us and it comes with like this force of like, oh my gosh, do this. This would be so fun and scary and exciting. Right? And then you
Right.
go into it, and then life is like, hey, yes, and we have these other things too. So you can do these things if you do it in a way that works for your life and your lifestyle. And but it is checking in with am I doing it because I want to, or am I doing it because I should? So I do think that
Mm.
it's easy to tip over sometimes into those boundaries and work with our own drive and know what's happening there.
I like that you said that. Am I doing this because I want to, or doing this because I should? Two different concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that just a little bit more for people?
Sure. So when you look at doing something that you want to do, there's sort of that openness to it that it's you're doing it out of desire. It's more heart opening. It's more you're doing it with a sense of freedom and excitement. So in a sense, you're doing it out of love, out of desire. So when we're doing something that we feel we should, there's more constriction, there's more pressure. It's more based on I feel like I have to do this. If I don't,
Mm.
then I'll criticize myself, I'll be criticized by someone else. There's that self rejection or self abandonment and that fear from others as well. So, which is why, that's one of the things that I will talk about with myself a lot, but certainly with my clients is tuning into, hey, what's the driving force here? Is this a voice of fear or is this a voice of faith?
I love the way you connect that. That is so that in itself can be so empowering, and I think that can, resonate with the audience as well. Is basically understanding the differences between the two, learning how to check yourself and asking yourself those real questions, because a lot of people might ask themselves or say like, I'm losing motivation in this. Well, are you losing motivation because it's something that you feel like you should do, or do you want to do it? And
Right.
maybe if it was something that you desired, then the motivation would automatically be there. Now, it doesn't mean that things aren't hard, because there's just some things that are hard to do.
Absolutely.
But
Hmm.
it's like if you have that desire, the motivation will naturally come because you want to get that. You want to do it. So
Right.
I really love that concept.
When I kind of think of it in an energy perspective, I
Mhm.
think of want to when we're doing things we want to, that's energy coming back into us. So it's
Mhm.
sort of filling our cup in a way. When we're doing things because we should, there becomes more energy out. So there's a bit more depletion. So if you start to notice that your energy's off, you're moody, you're feeling
Mhm.
agitated and disconnected, if you sit down and look at all the shoulds that you've created for yourself for the day, they generally outweigh the want tos. So you have more energy going out, whether through action or thought, than you have coming in. So that rebalance
Mhm.
becomes like, okay, what am I doing today that's energy out? And what can I balance it in to fill myself up from that place of depletion and do things I want to sort of rebalance the flow?
Great. That's so great. I love that concept. So, audience, I hope that you are hearing this, and even if you are hitting the replay button, definitely, take a take a check, and you use take a second and just check in with yourself, and maybe think about all the things that you have going on in your life right now, and see where you might be lagging in certain areas. And if you're lagging in certain areas, see if that is a should or a want, therefore you have the desire, because that might help you prioritize as well some of the things that that you're going to be doing. And granted, there are things in life that we have to do, like we should be
Hmm.
doing, right?
We're
It's
not getting
part
rid of the
of like our
shoulds.
obligation. we're not getting rid of the shoulds, but
No.
maybe so we don't get rid of the shoulds. We can't get rid of the shoulds. How can someone really navigate their lives so that even if there's shoulds, you're still able to get some of these things done?
Yeah. I think that's the part where we have that nurturing conversation with ourselves the way we would with somebody else that we love, whether it's a child or a friend or someone that we care about. We wouldn't sit there and say to them, well, look at your list, you should do all of those things. If you don't,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen? That wouldn't be our most
Mm-hmm.
loving and compassionate voice. We would more than likely sit with them and say, okay, what are the shoulds that you can accomplish today with the energy that you currently have? And what are some
Mm-hmm.
other ways that you can invite energy back in to fill up the places that feel depleted? And it might be doing less shoulds that day. So then you feel more replenished. And then the next day, you'll be able to have more energy to do some of those other shoulds that you couldn't do today because you're just spent.
Right. I love that. And then the next day, because you filled your cup with some of the things that you wanted and you had desire to do, maybe you have enough space and energy the next day for the shoulds.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Great. Okay. Is there anything in particular that you want to let the audience know about when it comes to in your business?
Well, I mean, my business is really focused on connecting with that loving guide that we all have and recognizing when that fear voice or that resistance voice, the shoulds, whatever that might be, is leading the show and leading our decision making and dominating the day. And we usually know that because we're feeling agitated. We might feel symptoms of anxiety. We might feel symptoms of depression. We might have our bodies aching. We might have more sickness and disease in our life that's coming in because those voices are so loud and we're not listening to them. So
Mm,
it's like push aside, push aside, push aside. We have to just get through it. Right. So I like to help people connect with those fears and that resistance, whatever it might be, so it can be expressed and that energy can move through them and they can
mhm,
connect back to that loving inner guide to be making those choices that better serve their everyday life, their bodies, their emotional system, their mental balance, and just having more contentment and joy in life.
that's great. And you also have a book out, right?
I do. I do. I
Tell
actually
us
have
about
two
it.
books. I have a children's book, The Secret to
Ooh.
Beating the Dragon, which
Oh.
yeah, and I'm not a children's book author, but I am a children's book author. So it also often gets kind of pushed aside. But every time I return to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this book. It's called The
Mhm.
Secret to Beating the Dragon, and the dragon is actually fear. And it's a rhyming book. So it's like, how do
Mm.
you work with fear? By looking at the fear, not cutting it down, not trying to slay it, by looking at it and saying, I see you. And then
Mm.
my other book, 30 Days to Me, was a book that I wrote when I was in my own funk and a place of
Mhm.
significant depletion, and how I was able to connect to my guiding intuitive voice, my loving voice. And it's a whole
Mhm.
30-day process of reconnection to self, basically, to that voice when fear is leading the show.
Right. I love it. Where can people find those books?
Most easily on Amazon.
Nice, nice. So it's something that we can also put in the comments just as well, so that people can find it easily. Where can people find you on social media? I know I already gave out the website as well.
So my website is livingwithserendipity.com.
Mhm.
My handle for Facebook is Living with Serendipity, and same with Instagram.
It makes it so much easier when all of it is the same, right?
It does. It really does. Even though it's super long and like who can remember how to spell serendipity? I'm always like spelling it out in my head, but it still works.
Yeah. Is there any last message that you want to send out to the audience?
I think that I can say the best practice, like if I was going to offer an everyday simple practice of how to connect to your fear, to be able to, as a guide, to connect back to your faith, would be to ask the daily question, or when you're starting to feel that tension or discomfort, just slow down and ask,
Mhm.
where do I feel the discomfort right now? What am I really scared of? What emotion am I right now resisting? And sometimes just that
Mm.
simple question, it's miraculous. And it really is miraculous what our bodies will respond with. Be like, I'll tell you, I've
Mhm.
been trying to tell you for 3 weeks. But we don't slow down
And
and
we stop and
ask.
listen. Right.
Right. And sometimes it's just that simple. And
Mm.
letting that those voices come up, those parts of us be heard, so we can work with them and ask for what they
Right.
need. And then, so once we respond to our needs, then we soften back into
Mm.
our bodies and we're able to feel that contentment and peace again.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. Oftentimes I follow up by telling my clients, like, when you don't listen, you're rejecting a part of yourself.
Yes.
And so part of that, part of the inability to love who you are authentically is because you keep rejecting the parts that are trying to come out and say something.
Right. And then we're mad at
Um,
everybody else in our life because we think they're ignoring us.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You can't hear me.
Great, great.
Oh. I'm not listening to me. So how can you hear me?
Right, right, exactly. Learn to trust yourself and the things that your
Hmm.
parts are telling you, and
Absolutely.
you'll see how different and the shift that you will make within yourself as well. It's such a powerful thing, and I love that you combine that with people who want to tell their stories, writing. So although I have people that love to write too, so definitely hop on to her community blog, because I think that can be so empowering for those who want to speak their own truth too, and just don't want to do it through talk therapy, but want to do it in a different platform. I think that
Yes.
can be so beneficial to those out there that just want to say something. Empower
Yes.
yourself, empower your parts, like it's there for you. So living with serendipity. Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. It was such a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you for
And
having me.
thank you for everybody who has tuned in live and in the replay. And we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thanks.